Satire is the inflation of real-world people, events, and ideas to absurd proportions. But what happens when reality becomes satire? What happens when the institutions being satirized behave in a more absurd manner than comedy writers could possibly dream up and put into a script? This video is about the 2021 film Don't Look Up. And in case you couldn't tell by the last paragraph, it is going to be an inherently political video because this is an inherently political film. If that isn't your thing, I don't know. Mute the video and leave it running while you do some laundry or something. The plot of the movie is reasonably straightforward. A group of scientists discover a comet hurtling towards Earth that will end all life on the planet. They alert the necessary government agencies who run up the flagpole to the White House. Initially, the White House does not take this threat seriously, and the scientists are dismissed, causing them to turn to the media, where they're laughed at and ridiculed for their perceived hysteria. Eventually, the apocalyptic findings are corroborated by the White House's own scientists, and a mission is set in motion to avert the disaster. Hope flourishes, as the prognosis for the success of the mission is quite good at its outset. All's going well until the unnervingly eccentric billionaire comes on the scene and whispers sweet nothings into the ear of the president. Shortly thereafter, the previous mission is called off, and all of the pilots involved turn around and head home. Evidently, the sweet nothings that were being whispered into the ear of the most powerful person on the planet were as such. The planet-ending comet hurtling towards Earth contains a vast quantity of highly valuable minerals. Minerals that the president and her affluent associate mean to harvest to bolster their already substantial pocketbooks. While this information is vile in the eyes of the scientists, as it would be in the eyes of most people, it nonetheless causes a schism amidst the nerds. Two of this group are dismissed due to their dissent from the actions of the administration, but one of them stays on the project, claiming that he'll be a voice of reason when, in reality, he's just slowly becoming ensorcelled with his newly acquired fame. As the asteroid looms ever ominous, the characters cope with this fact as best they can. Other governments have failed in averting disaster, leaving the fate of the planet in the hands of an eccentric billionaire and his sycophantic elected puppets. As is to be expected, the mining of the asteroid fails along with the mission. The planet is doomed, and the rich and powerful flee on a spaceship that was constructed for just such an occasion. An offer to join is extended to the scientist that was on their team, but he declines. Instead, the protagonists accept their fate and share a heartwarming meal with those they care about as the world ends around them. The planet is destroyed, the rich escape, and no one lives happily ever after. This film is phenomenal. From the writing to the performances to the cinematography, every aspect was executed nearly flawlessly. The plot is to some degree a play on the folktale of Chicken Little. The sky is falling and so on. The key difference being that in the children's story, the sky does not fall, whereas in Don't Look Up, the sky very much does fall. In Chicken Little, the animal friends blindly follow the ill-given advice of a hysterical chicken, while in the film, humans blindly ignore the accredited scientists. Both works teach valuable lessons about blind hysteria and blind skepticism, respectively. That being said, the latter aspect is much more applicable in the current political and social climate than the former. The plot of this movie hits a little bit too close to home currently and lends an extra element of gravitas to the preceding story beats. Social and political commentary aside for the current moment, there is also a genuinely good human element in the story. Even if the underlying message was utterly gutted and the film was nothing more than an examination of how people would react knowing that their time on this planet was all but over, there would still be value here. As the end times dawn, the characters react in various ways, from Randall cheating on his wife to Kate's adoption of a nihilistic attitude in regards to basically everything. The various reactions to the end times are expansive and worth mentioning. Speaking of things that are worth mentioning, the cast and the performances are also outstanding. Such a thing is to be expected from a cast of this caliber, so I won't speak on it more than saying A+. That being said, while there is no shortage of big names and talented actors in the film, there is one that was not featured in any of the advertising that really stole the show. This cat. Look at him. 10 out of 10 cat. Here he is again, and again, and again. What I will expand upon with a little bit more detail is the cinematography of the film. Don't Look Up is absolutely beautiful to look at. For a film with very few special effects, this film is so visually striking that it would be doing a disservice not to mention it. The color palette is superb and the camera work is fantastic, bolstering the compelling narrative with an equally compelling viewing experience. Look at this shot of an airplane at dawn. There's nothing glaringly impressive about it, but it's just such a good example of the fundamentals done well. The framing is great and the color palette really establishes what the shot is going for. A plane ride to DC to let the president know that the world is ending. There's not much to say besides that, but just look at it. This frame and the ones preceding and following it are just very easy on the eyes. Now look at this shot, or sequence of shots, paying specific attention to the color palette. There are varying shades of blue throughout, with just a hint of red in the background due to the exit sign. This may seem out of place until we move to the next shot where the same color palette is used and the red returns in the form of Kate's hair. This is such a small thing, but it really shows a level of attention to detail that could have just as easily been glossed over. Finally, look at this shot of the second rocket launch. We get the sun setting in the background, which always looks pretty, but is not in and of itself a marvel of cinematography, but it still lends credence to the overall aesthetic of the shot. We get a less natural glow coming off the base of each of the rockets, a synthetic glow juxtaposed against the natural glow of the sunset that serves to bolster the overall tone of the sequence. Juxtaposition is put to further use here in regards to the design of the rockets themselves. This is the second mission, the one proposed by the Steve Jobs / Elon Musk parody, the one that is clearly doomed to fail. The first almost successful mission made a point of using a hodgepodge of repurposed crafts, giving the sequence an air of desperation and necessity. Compare that to this one where the rockets are sleek and elegant, but they do fail, and this plays into the fact that they are aesthetically pleasing yet functionally suboptimal. This plays into the theme of sensationalism versus pragmatism that will be touched on later, and really just exemplifies that facet of the message in a relatively short shot. I have very little negative to say about this film. Such thoughts can be summed up in 2 words: Jonah Hill. This gripe might be an intentional choice by the filmmaker and therefore could be ostensibly categorized as a success. But holy shnikes, this character is annoying. This is obviously the point of the character, but the fact that I'm so irked by him can to some degree speak to the quality of the writing. The fact remains, however, that this character is on screen, and I'm annoyed by him, and being annoyed is really unpleasant. I get that this character is a parody of an entitled rich boy who fails upwards, but every time Mr. Hill opens his mouth, I can feel the bile rise in the back of my throat. There are no shortage of characters that lampoon reality, running the gamut from endearing to repugnant. I'm fine with all of those, as they lend credence to the rest of the narrative, but Mr. Hill's character really doesn't. He is theoretically there solely for comedic relief, and really doesn't provide any. He merely serves to become the target of my ire with every irksome utterance. Don't Look Up can serve as a sort of Rorschach test for any given person's pet issue. It could be said that the film most cleanly maps onto an allegory for global warming, but its message could be applied to any number of things, from vaccine skepticism in the recent past to the catastrophic economic policies of the present. But I would posit as a slightly more nuanced takeaway. The film isn't commenting on any specific issue, but more on how the internet has destroyed our ability for rational thought. It would seem a strange concept. After all of the world's information is contained in a rectangle in our pockets. But how does one parse all of this information if they're unqualified to do so? Put it succinctly, one doesn't. One picks a side that corroborates their existing beliefs and digs their heels in. To further the commentary on internet discourse, this film also draws a stark distinction between the oftentimes banal nature of credible experts and the sensational nature of pop culture politics. Instead of listening to scientists yammer on about this and that, our cultural attention goes to that which is the most epic. The eschewing of nuance in favor of punchy headlines is, at least in my opinion, more applicable to the imminent doom represented by the comment than any given issue in particular. This is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned sensationalism versus pragmatism. What gets clicks, what gets views, what gets votes is sensationalism, but nuance is anathema sensationalism. Nuance is tedious, complex, and oftentimes just flat out boring. Most people just want to read the headlines because doing a deep dive into any given issue is a lot of work, and folks usually don't have the time or inclination to do that work. To put it succinctly, Don't Look Up can be viewed as a cautionary tale about what happens when the fate of the world rests in the hands of headline readers and the politicians that they elected. Oftentimes, whether or not a movie is worth watching is a largely subjective matter, but I would make the case that this is less so for this movie or really any other movie with an overt point that it's trying to convey. Typically, the purpose of a film is to entertain. They're made to one degree or another be underlying messages, themes, and so on, but many movies don't really give a reason for a person to walk away thinking about things. So when a movie has something to say, I would make the case that it's a reasonable course of action to at least hear it out, and at the very least see if you agree with what's being said. Even if the underlying message is something that you disagree with, I would encourage you to give such works a watch. After all, if one holds such strong convictions, that individual ought to relish in the opportunity to have them challenged, instead of blindly following them and refusing to look up.